I recently got to go to Spain and ride something which I've been very excited about, which is the new Shimano Dura-Ace Di2 groupset. Now I say new, but we've known about this since last summer, and the pure mechanical version of the groupset is already on bikes. People are riding it and there are reviews out there. But the Di2 version and the combined hydraulic and Di2 version is completely new, and we were amongst the first to ride it. Basically, new Dura-Ace Di2 is in no way surprising in that it's extremely good.
Finish.
That's the end. Aside from major changes to the looks, which obviously you can't miss, the big headlines are to do with lots of small refinements and everything just being packaged more neatly. And Shimano have now brought Synchronized Shifting to the road groupset, which is something they already had with the mountain bike stuff. Synchro-shifting gives you the option to not think about shifting your derailleurs separately at all, so you can literally just give an up command or a down command, or a harder, easier if you prefer to think of it that way. So what that means is you press a button and your rear derailleur will shift, and at a given point your front derailleur will also shift without you having to do anything else. One thing I should point out, and that Shimano is very keen for me to point out, is that you can disable synchronized shifting completely if you don't want it and you just like to shift your derailleurs separately, which is what most of us are used to. You can also do what they call semi-synchronized shifting, which is where you do everything normally except that it will do an automatic compensation shift at the rear for you when you shift your front derailleur. For the most part, the synchro experience actually is fine, but the one time that I found it kind of disconcerting was if you were going up a climb and you'd started out in the big ring, then when that shift to the inner ring on the front came, it could be sort of jarring because there was this momentary drop in resistance as the chain moved over. The mountain bike Di2 group sets give you a sort of beep warning when that front shift is coming, but on the road one that I was testing, that didn't appear to be an option. I think if you're a casual rider who doesn't ride particularly aggressively, and in particular who doesn't stand up very much when they're riding, then you'll probably be quite happy with it, and it is really, really idiot-proof, because as I say, it's literally upshift, downshift. That's all you have to think about. In any case, it's very easy to turn synchro shift on and off. They've integrated both a button to do that and a charging port into a very neat bar plug thing. So instead of having a little box underneath your stem like you're used to with Di2, it's now neatly hidden inside the bar. Overall, the shifting is absolutely fantastic. The problem, it's not really a problem exactly, is that it already was. Dura-Ace 9070, which was the previous version, was so good that it's hard to say that they've made any real improvement there. The one thing that is quite noticeable is that it's very, very tolerant of bad behaviour, this group set. So you can run it fully cross-chained, so in the big ring at the front, big cog at the back, and it's actually still quite quiet. I think that's down to the fact that they've done quite a lot of work on tooth profiles to make things run more smoothly. That's been necessitated by wider disc hubs and the desire to keep chainstays reasonably short, so you can now have a more extreme chain line than you used to be allowed to. One of our bugbears with Di2, as long as it's existed, is that the buttons have never really been quite big enough or quite separate enough. And in a sense, that hasn't really changed because the shift buttons are still right next to each other. What has got better is that there's more feel with them. They haven't gone quite as far as SRAM has with ETAP, where you click it and there's that sort of rifle crack sound, but there is definitely more feedback. There's a more pronounced click when you press to shift now. It's worth pointing out this is actually the first time that discs have formed part of a Shimano group set. Now you're all going to jump up and say, no, you're wrong. But previously, all the disc components were what they called non-series. So you had, for example, the R785 levers, the R685 levers, and so on and so forth. Now you get discs, disc brakes, disc levers, which all say Dura-Ace on them. And that is a sign that Shimano is kind of all in on the disc front. The braking is, as you'd expect, extremely good. Shimano has designed some really cool looking new vented rotors which are very space age. The other thing that is probably worth mentioning is that the new Dura-Ace rotors have a slightly beveled edge because, as we all know, professional riders are terrified of having their legs cut off by spinning discs. It is quite amusing that they've made them look more like circular saw blades though. One criticism that we've had with previous Shimano disc levers is that the adjustments haven't been brilliant, and that doesn't seem to have changed very much. So there is a small free stroke adjustment built in, essentially like a bite point adjustment, but it is such a small adjustment that it has very little effect. There is at least a reach adjustment, but again, it's over quite a small range. One of the really cool things about the new Di2 stuff is the level of customizability it offers. So using the eTube app, you can set all kinds of functionality. You can assign any shift action to any button in the system, which is pretty extraordinary if you think about it. So the shifters actually have electronic buttons on top of the hoods as well as the main shift buttons, and you can, for instance, assign those to shift if you want to. You can also add satellite shifters wherever you want them, so you could do all kinds of quirky things with time trial triathlon setups. You could create a system that's designed for somebody with one hand, where you have all the shifting on one side for both derailleurs. You can configure the top buttons to flick through the screens on your cycle computer, so if you're on the rivet and you don't want to take your hands off the shifters, you don't have to. You can also alter the behaviour of the synchro-shifting, so you can influence when it chooses to do that front shift, and you can set stuff like shift speed as well. The possibilities are endless. Perhaps my biggest reservation about the new group set before I'd seen it in person was actually the way it looks, because I was such a huge fan of Dura-Ace 9000, but actually in the metal I think it looks very nice and a lot more premium than photographs might suggest. The only caveat is that dark finish is likely to show wear more than a straight metallic one would. In fact, one of my colleagues has been riding the mechanical Dura-Ace for a while now, and he has already managed to take quite a lot of the finish off. The Dura-Ace R9170 group set, which I was riding, is expected to retail at about £3,200, or roughly the same number of dollars. You might be wondering why I haven't mentioned one of the other headline features of new Dura-Ace, which is that there's an integrated power meter crank. It was supposed to be at this press camp, but it hadn't arrived in time, so none of us got to try it. I can tell you that it's a power meter that measures power on both sides of the crank, and it has a battery permanently fitted inside the spindle, which is rechargeable. So new Dura-Ace Di2 is really, really good, but it's also pretty much exactly what we expected from Shimano. It's a group set that builds very heavily on the success of its predecessor without doing anything that's really, really cutting edge. They've brought in some cool features, and they've included a lot of customizability and the synchro-shift from the mountain bike side, but fundamentally the shifting arrangement is otherwise quite similar, the ergonomics are quite similar, and the braking is what we'd already come to expect from Shimano's existing road disc stuff. Is it better than 9000? Yes, it is, but it isn't a great leap forward. Is it better than SRAM ETAP? We're not sure yet. Watch this space.